Something unusual appears when you watch Max Verstappen drive at the limit. At first, it looks almost chaotic. The car moves constantly through the corners, the steering wheel never seems completely still, and the rear of the car often looks like it is on the edge of sliding. Tiny corrections appear again and again as the car flows through each turn. Compared to other drivers, the onboard footage can look more aggressive and sometimes even slightly unstable. But then you look at the lap times, and the numbers tell a different story. Max Verstappen is often just as fast or faster through the same corners where other drivers appear smoother and calmer. Engineers studying telemetry began noticing a pattern that appeared again and again in the data. Max Verstappen seemed to operate in a range where most drivers struggled to stay consistent. The car looked closer to instability, closer to sliding, and closer to the edge of grip. And that raised an important question. How close to the limit can a Formula One driver really go before performance starts to drop? To understand why this matters, it helps to understand what the limit of grip actually means in Formula One. Every tyre produces a maximum amount of grip depending on load, temperature, and surface conditions. As a driver increases speed through a corner, the tyres generate larger forces to keep the car on its intended path. At first, the grip increases smoothly as steering input rises. The car feels stable and predictable. But eventually, the tyre reaches its peak grip level. Beyond that point, any additional demand causes the tyre to slide. Once sliding begins, the tyre loses efficiency and the car becomes harder to control. The fastest laps usually happen right at the edge of that peak grip level, too far below the limit, and the driver leaves performance on the table. Too far beyond the limit, and the car loses speed through excessive sliding. The ideal zone is extremely narrow, often only a small percentage of the total grip range. Staying inside that zone consistently is one of the most difficult skills in Formula One. Most drivers operate with a small safety margin below the absolute limit. That margin allows them to remain consistent even as conditions change from lap to lap. Tyre temperatures vary, track grip evolves, and fuel load changes throughout the race. A driver who operates slightly below the limit can adapt more easily without risking sudden mistakes. Engineers often prefer this approach because it produces stable lap times and predictable behavior. When telemetry traces are analysed, drivers operating with a margin below the limit usually show smoother steering inputs and fewer corrections. The tyres remain within a stable grip range, and the car behaves predictably through each phase of the corner. But Max Verstappen's telemetry often looks different. When engineers compared data traces, they noticed that his steering inputs contained more frequent adjustments. The steering angle changed in small increments throughout the corner rather than settling into one steady position. Tyre slip levels sometimes appeared slightly higher than other drivers in the same corner. The car's movement suggested that the tyres were operating closer to their maximum capability. Yet, despite this apparent instability, the lap times remained consistent. Instead of producing erratic results, the data showed repeatable performance at very high speeds. At first, some engineers believed this difference might be caused by the Red Bull car itself. Red Bull designs have often featured strong front-end grip and sharp response to steering inputs. A responsive car can appear more active even when driven within its limits. It seemed possible that the car's characteristics might explain why the onboard footage looked more aggressive, but this explanation did not fully match the data. Other drivers using similar setups did not always show the same patterns. Even when teammates drove the same car, the telemetry differences often remained visible. That suggested the effect was not purely mechanical. Another theory focused on driving style. Max Verstappen has always been known for aggressive commitment and precise car control. Some engineers believed he might simply be pushing harder into corners, accepting more movement in exchange for higher speed. Aggression alone, however, does not guarantee faster lap times. Excessive sliding usually overheats the tyres and reduces grip over time. Drivers who push too far beyond the limit often struggle with consistency. Yet, Max Verstappen frequently maintained both speed and consistency, which suggested something more controlled was happening. As engineers continued studying the data, they began examining tyre slip behavior more closely. Tire slip refers to the small difference between the direction a tire is pointing and the direction it is actually traveling. A small amount of slip is necessary to generate cornering force, but too much slip wastes energy and reduces efficiency. When Max Verstappen's data was compared to other drivers, a subtle pattern appeared. His tires often operated slightly closer to peak slip levels without exceeding them. The slip values rose quickly toward the optimal range and remained near that range for longer portions of the corner. This meant that Max Verstappen was using a greater percentage of available grip. While other drivers sometimes stayed slightly below the peak range, Max often reached that range earlier and maintained it longer. The difference might only represent a small percentage of total grip, but in Formula One even tiny differences matter. A driver using 98% of available grip will usually be faster than a driver using 95%, even if both remain within control. Operating closer to the limit requires extremely fast feedback and precise control. As the tires approach their peak grip level, small changes in steering or throttle can produce large changes in balance. Drivers must react quickly to maintain stability. Max Verstappen's steering traces often showed exactly that kind of rapid adjustment. The small corrections visible in onboard footage reflected continuous control rather than instability. Each adjustment kept the tires operating near their optimal range. These rapid adjustments also allowed Max to explore the limit more precisely. Instead of waiting until the car began to understeer or oversteer significantly, he could detect small changes in grip earlier. By reacting to these early signals, he could maintain control while staying close to the maximum performance level. This approach allowed him to extract performance without crossing into uncontrolled sliding. Another important effect appeared during long corners. In extended high-speed corners, tire grip often decreases gradually as temperature builds. Drivers operating below the limit may need to increase steering angle as grip fades. Drivers operating too far above the limit may lose stability as the tires overheat. Max Verstappen's telemetry often showed a different pattern. Instead of large changes in steering angle, the adjustments remained small and continuous. The car stayed near peak grip even as conditions evolved within the corner. Corner exits revealed another advantage. A driver operating near peak grip can often transition to acceleration more efficiently. If the tires remain within their optimal range, throttle application can begin earlier without provoking wheel spin or instability. Max Verstappen frequently appeared able to accelerate earlier while maintaining control. Even small improvements in exit speed can produce significant lap time gains because the car carries that extra speed along the following straight. When engineers combined steering traces, speed data, and tire slip measurements, the pattern became clearer. Max Verstappen consistently spent more time near the peak grip range than most drivers. The difference was not dramatic in any single moment, but it appeared repeatedly throughout the lap. Each corner contained small segments where Max used slightly more of the available grip. Over an entire lap, these segments combined into measurable performance gains, and this is where the full explanation becomes clear. Max Verstappen drives closer to the limit of grip than most drivers, and telemetry data shows it in subtle ways. Steering corrections appear more frequently because the tires are operating near their maximum capability. Slip levels remain close to the optimal range for longer periods. The safety margin between control and sliding is smaller, but it remains carefully managed. The car operates right at the edge where performance is highest. This does not mean Max Verstappen constantly exceeds the limit. Crossing the limit would produce large slides and inconsistent lap times. Instead, he operates just below that boundary, using nearly all available grip while maintaining control. The difference between operating near the limit and operating slightly below it may be small, but it defines the performance gap between elite drivers and the rest of the field. Once you understand this detail, Max Verstappen's onboard footage begins to look different. The constant movement of the steering wheel no longer appears chaotic. The small slides no longer look uncontrolled. Instead, they reveal a driver operating extremely close to the edge of performance. Because in Formula One, the fastest drivers are not the ones who avoid the limit. They are the ones who can stay closest to it without crossing over. and telemetry suggests that Max Verstappen may be one of the best in the world at doing exactly that.